My name is Claudia Biçen, and I've spent the last 2 years working on a project called Thoughts in Passing, which is a series of audio-visual portraits, graphite pencil portraits, accompanied by 3-minute audio clips of people in hospice. So everybody that I interviewed and worked with were told that they had 6 months or less to live.
I met Claudia recently in San Francisco at an event called You're Gonna Die. Poetry, prose, and everything goes. I'd planned to have her project Thoughts in Passing as part of an upcoming episode on the death positive movement. But after seeing it live, it was pretty clear that it deserved not only an entire episode, but 2. What in God's name prompted you to even want to do this project?
There wasn't anything specific. I've just always been fixated on this question of how should I live my life. Ever since I was young, this was the question that was most important to me. And I have tried to understand it from so many different perspectives and I've studied many different things I did my degree in philosophy and psychology, and then I did a graduate degree in anthropology. I've studied a lot of meditation and different spiritual traditions. And so this was a sort of a natural progression to be like, okay, but what would people tell me about how to live when they're on their deathbed?
Finally, I found someone that thinks exactly like I think. It's amazing and you're not crazy. So would you say that you were looking for maybe an answer?
Definitely. Yeah. I'm always looking for the answers.
But I guess let me rephrase it. You were going in thinking that people that were terminal, that had 6 months or less to live, would have the insight that they could share with you.
Yes, I definitely had made that presumption, which now, looking back, may or may not have been the correct presumption.
Like Claudia, I'm always searching for the answers. And interviewing people in a hospice would seem like the perfect, prolific shortcut to becoming more enlightened. This adventure begins in San Francisco and takes us into the lives and final thoughts of 9 people dying in hospice. Grab some tissue, and please join me for episode 6 of The Adventures of Memento Mori, part 1 of Thoughts in Passing.
From the Maida Creative Company, this is The Adventures of Memento Mori, a seeker's guide for learning to live by remembering to die. The podcast that explores mortality. Here's your host, D.S. Moss.
So I need to set up the project a bit more. The intended way to experience it is to see the drawn portraits in tandem with listening to the audio. And you can do so by going to our site, remembertodie.com, or the project site, thoughtsinpassing.com. But before you do that, play along with me here in the podcast. In lieu of her drawn portraits, I've asked Claudia to illustrate her subjects by describing something about them that impacted her the most. As you listen, imagine what they look like, what their lives may have been like, and if, maybe, they sound a bit familiar to you.
My first subject was Randy, and I met him in San Francisco. Randy had been in and out of AA throughout his life, and he grew up in Tennessee, and he was gay, had moved because he was gay, and really, I think, struggled with the shame around that his entire life, which was an important experience for me to see, as having, my brother is gay, my closest friend is gay, and to see that one generation behind and the shame that came with that. And so much of the work that we did together was about him learning to forgive himself and love himself.
I made peace with dying last year. I paid for my funeral in advance, bought my headstone. I've done all this stuff so that when I die, nobody has to do anything. And I'm okay. That's the one thing I won't do, is look back on my life with regret. There was no book with instructions on how to do this. So you learn as you go along, and you stumble and you fall. And I've stumbled a lot in my life. I don't know of anybody who hasn't. When I left Tennessee, I felt suffocated. I was ashamed of being gay. I felt less than everyone else. Wanted to get as far away from Tennessee as I could. I did. I fell in love with California almost immediately. I remember thinking how free I felt. I felt like the whole world was mine for taking at that moment. The drinking took off soon after that. What started off as casual progressed into daily drinking, drinking at home, drinking at work, drinking at bars. And I went out and got drunk with some friends, went back home with this guy, and we're having sex, and the condom breaks, and we're so drunk that we don't care. And I know in my heart that's when I still converted, because it was immediately after that I got the flu. You know, when you're young, you make these wild choices, which is, I guess, what youth is about, that you can make these mistakes and learn from them. It's so funny because those things that I was reaching for in my 20s, I got hold of, and they're never what you think they are. I was always looking for the next best thing. Now, it's not what I would do. I got sober the first time at 29. And that's when my spiritual path started, because I did realize that I could pick the God I wanted. To me, God is an energy, love. Once my understanding of God started to change, I realized it wasn't a punishment. HIV was a mistake. It was a mistake I made. We're here to learn something. I'm learning it as a gay man, whatever my life lesson is. And being HIV is part of that life lesson. If I die today or die next week, I'm at peace with living, I'm at peace with dying. I am a culmination, all the things I've done up to this point.
I interviewed a woman named Ina, and she was one of the most, she's like the quintessential, like beautiful old lady who I would come in, she'd be like, hey, sweetie, like, how's your day? Like, how's your day, sweetie? Like, oh, you look beautiful today. And her nails were always painted, and she always had her jewelry on, and she was just so delightful. But when you got speaking to her, you saw that like there was so much regret in her life.
When I was young, which was like a million years ago, I made up my mind I was going to help people. You don't think for yourself when you have a large family. I've always been more interested in other people than myself. And it seems like when you're a nurse, they think that that's what you should do. Take care of everybody that comes along. So I did. There was always somebody to take care of. But then when I arrived to my own old age, they were all gone. It's hard to lose all your family and friends. You'll see what I mean when you get to be an old lady. I have lots of regrets. I don't think I did much for myself. I don't accomplish very much in my life. I had lots of opportunities. I had a chance to have a job as a nurse traveling all over the world, and I turned it down because I had to take care of my mom and dad. But most of the things you plan don't come true. At least it didn't for me. When you're young, you think everything should go your way, I think. Go to a dance and dance all night and all that stuff. And you think that's part of your life. But then it doesn't last for long. It's not a forever thing. You have a different opinion of things after you get older. Mostly, if you want to write a thick book, you could write what I didn't do. that I should have done, but I didn't do it, no matter what it was. You know, I drew a horse when I was in high school, and I never could put a tail on it. And I think it's still wandering around the family somewhere with this horse with no tail. And I couldn't do it. I tried and tried. I traced them and tried all different tails. Never came out right. Maybe he was born to be without a tail. I don't know.
Hers is the only portrait where she's smiling. You sort of very quickly see this sadness. Hers, I cry every time. I think she reminds me of my grandmother, so that's a hard one.
More thoughts in passing after this.
Hello, fellow provocateurs who believe death is a topic worth talking about. We need your help spreading the word. Be the slightly odd yet endlessly fascinating conversationalist at your next party and tell your friends about the Adventures of Memento Mori. Want to stay in the loop? Join our inner circle by going to our site, theadventuresofmementomori.com, and be sure to stay up to date with the quest for enlightenment on YouTube by following our channel, The Adventures of Memento Mori podcast. And now, back to the show.
We're back talking with Claudia Biçen, creator of Thoughts in Passing, a project in which she interviewed and drew the portraits of 9 people in hospice who were told that they had 6 months or less to live.
I contacted almost every hospice in the Bay Area, so I ended up working with about 10 hospices. And I started with the Zen Hospice Project, and BJ Miller, he was the first person that I connected with. And he said yes straight away. I was extremely lucky that he said yes.
This is a total side note, but one of the unexpected things to come out of this podcast so far is the community around the topic of death. For lack of a better term, there are leaders in this space, and BJ Miller of Zen Hospice is certainly one of them. I highly, highly recommend checking out his TED Talk, What Really Matters at the End of Life. Anyway.
I contacted so many others, Coming Home Hospice, Hospice by the Bay, Gentiva Hospice, tons. And over time, they started getting back to me, and every single hospice said yes. That yes, we want you to work on this project with us. And I think they said that because if you work within that field, you're all too aware of how much people in hospice are really pushed to the side of society and pushed out of society. And to be able to do something for them where they're creating a kind of legacy that we can then share with the community, I think was something that really resonated with people. So one of the next people I interviewed was Harlan. He was a truck driver for 25 years. He had actually been in hospital and hospice for about 5 years, I think, in total. And he had a long time to really reflect on his life.
I was born in Turlock, California in 1960 and pretty much lived my entire life in the Central Valley. I think I got married in 85, had a couple kids. I never felt that we were poor, never felt that we were rich, just average middle-class folks, you know. I drove a truck for about 25 years, and I ended up with this cancer in 2008. You go through the ups and downs of why me, and then you come to a point where you get over all that and just accept it. And I've accepted it by that's the cards I was dealt. My window here stays open 24/7. I do not close it. I watch the sunrise every morning. And when I can see the sunrise, I know I've made it another day. I live by a day-to-day basis. You know, sometimes when I get out on the scooter, I'll go way out and about and sit under the trees and sit in the shade. And, you know, you listen to the wind rustle through the trees and stuff. And it's also a good time to reflect. It took getting cancer to kind of see some of the bad choices you make in your life. I was always trying to make an extra buck, worked a lot of overtime, took a lot of extra loads. She wanted me to be there beside her, and I do miss that. I miss just laying with somebody at night. If I had it all over to do again, I wouldn't work as much as I did because in the end, the money really wasn't worth it. I could have spent more time with my family. When my dad passed away, he was in the hospital and I was under the assumption that he was going to come home the next day. Well, I went home because I was going to go to work the next day. I got a phone call about 11:45 at night. My wife told me my dad had passed away. And that irritated me to the point because there were questions I was going to ask him. My son, he's only called me once since I've been up here. And I think if my son doesn't talk to me, I think he's going to end up feeling the same way I did. I tend to show little emotion up until the time when I got cancer. Then I changed. I don't have time for the small stuff. I'm not going to argue and bicker over some minor BS, I hope I have time to say some of the things or ask some of the questions I want to ask before it's too late.
Harlan was a amazing person. He probably impacted me one of the most. He was very soulful. He did undergo, I think, a transformative experience, and he put down a lot of the, there's a line in his audio about I don't have time for the BS anymore. I don't have time for that. I think it hit him, that time hit him. Then I met with a woman called Jenny, who became huge in my life. She was there at the show, if you saw her.
I did. I was walking up the hill when they came, and then the woman that was pushing the wheelchair, I was like, please let me push this up the hill. And she's like, no, I got it. I want to do it. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, so Jenny...
And then Jenny's like, why did you let him do it?
She had, I think at the end of her video on Friday night, she just shouts out, son of a bitch. And I'm like, oh, Jenny, I love you. So she's been a big role in my life.
Hospice. You hear words, you have an idea what they are. And then when it's happening, you don't have a clue what hospice is. It's just a word. And now all of a sudden this word has meaning. And you look around and you think, a sick person must live here. And then it dawns on you that you're that sick person. Sometimes I wonder what I have to look forward to. And the more I think on that, the more it draws me to what it was. I as a child, I had nothing. And I had to make my life work because I was kept in the attic. And not having anything, I would purloin things from the school. And in time, I had paint, brushes, scraps of paper. Art would take me to another world. Oh, I tried to tell people that things weren't right at my place, but nobody listened. So by the fourth foster home, they didn't have a clue what to do with me. They started to give me medication, and they had me on 28 pills a day. And I was introduced to shock treatment. Nothing terrified me more than that. And I would hang in the back, and the paint on the walls would seem to bubble up, and there would be insects and snakes crawling underneath the paint. And I think where my head is now, I have come so far. Art is like the giver of life for me. To look at something and then to draw it. It's like becoming one with the object, and it makes you feel more whole and more whole. Throughout my entire existence, I enjoyed going to that place of peace. And I wonder about people who never ever know high peace. And I felt lucky that I knew. Little old nobody me could get high peace.
What I love most about Jenny, and which you cannot see in the video or hear in her audio, she is one of the most phenomenal, beautiful artists I've ever met. And when I met with her, she's surrounded by hundreds of pieces of artwork in this tiny apartment. And we would sit at her table and she would slurp on this like grape soda with ice and crunch on her ice and just chain smoke cigarettes and just monologue for an hour. And then at the end of the hour, she'd be like, okay, we're done here.
Luckily, we are not done here. There's more thoughts in passing after this. But before we cut to Ruthie asking you to buy something or to donate, I'd like to ask for your help in passing on the podcast to your friends and family. If you feel talking about death is a conversation worth having, then we'd love your support. The more ears, the better. Now, here's Ruthie.
Do you consider yourself to be a fellow seeker? Do you believe there's something more to being human than what's available in the illusory cocoon of our material world? Or perhaps you're thinking of starting an existential scavenger hunt and would like a guidebook to help chart your path? If yes, you're in luck. Go to theadventuresofmementomori.com and sign up to receive D.S. Moss's upcoming book, Something to Believe in, a seeker's guide to finding your big belief. Sign up today and start your journey.
What's interesting about Daniel, which you can't tell from the audio, but on the Friday night, everybody kind of cheered and claps at the end of Daniel's audio, because he talks about death not being a big deal. He thinks it's going to be fine. It's not really a big deal. And what nobody knew from that is actually right at the end of his life, I was passing by his hospice, and I often would see people after we'd finished the project. I'd take them for lunch, I'd go and pop in and see them. And I was walking by his hospice and I went in to see him, and he was terrified. He had like transitioned into this like different state. He was kind of delirious, he was sobbing, and he was on his own. And I sat with him and I held him for like 20 minutes, and he just broke down and cried, and I just held him. And it was the hardest, I think one of the hardest things I've ever done. I knew he was dying, like really dying.
It was one day, I don't remember the day right this very second. I was probably 6 or 7 or 8. But the anguish of thinking, of feeling, of realizing that I would die one day was overwhelming. I didn't confide in anyone about these feelings. I mean, I just couldn't. If I would be giving advice to my younger self, I would very simply say not to worry, that things are much more normal and natural than what people make them of. I really think that it's the big mystery comes from the moment we are born. Where are we coming from, and how do we form this geometric profile of ourselves that is already sealed upon this birth from way before? Instead, dying is much more concrete. If you want me to tell you what I believe in, I think I would believe in just about nothing at all. Really, truly. It's all a fantasy. There's an abyss involved, but I don't feel it. The more each day passes, I feel less resentful. Resent is not something that is part of what's happening to me. I feel I don't criticize the world as I used to. I feel I accept the world as it comes and it goes. And I don't think it's that important, the world. I always thought that in the end, one is afraid of dying. And it may very well be, eventually. But as far as I can tell you right now, this very minute, I kind of have the feeling, the idea that it's not going to be a major event. It's just going to happen.
The next day, I had a call from my friend who actually worked in hospice, who referred me to him, telling me that he had died. And I went back to the room and I stood with her, and we stood in the room together with his body in the room. And that shook me a lot. Not being with his dead body, but being there just the day before and seeing this person who I do believe him. I don't think he was terrified. I think his mechanism for getting through what he was getting through was so powerful and so strong that he just hadn't really looked into the abyss. And like on that day, the abyss was there, very present.
If you're on the water, take care.
And why do you think you were referring to that once you were going back and listening to your questions in the interview, there was one particular question that had the word dying in it, and that your voice quivered when you said it. Why do you think that we have such a hard time even saying the word?
The exact question that I really struggled with, and I didn't even know I struggled with it at the time, it was only when I was listening back to the recordings that I felt the fear in my voice. But the exact question was, what does it feel like to be dying? And now, having asked lots of people that question, everybody says the same thing to me. Nobody's asking me that question. And I think we don't ask that question. Maybe we don't want to know the answer. Maybe it feels way too personal to ask people of that question. It's a very demanding question. It's also admitting that this person is dying. And I think often we have this, we want to maintain a framework of hope, maybe, and actually sort of saying, all right, you're dying. Let's talk about that. It brings in a whole other set of things that I think we're not willing to accept at that point in time. It's like, maybe it's like giving up.
I think, yeah, that's what I was just thinking of. It's funny that and I don't know if it's a Western thing or just a dying thing, but at what point do you fight? At what point is the fight then over? Mm-hmm. And you live with acceptance, right?
And that's part of our cultural rhetoric, is this fight, right? The battle. We're going to battle cancer. We're going to fight cancer. And therefore, anybody that dies from X malady or illness has lost the fight, and they almost like they failed, right? They failed and we lost the battle. And that's bound up with a whole other set of feelings, I think, around that. You know, you can't, winning the battle is getting better, but the reality is we're all dying. I mean, we're all dying.
We're all going to lose the battle.
Yeah, everyone's going to lose the battle.
And on that happy note, thanks for joining me on another episode of The Adventures of Memento Mori. I've been incredibly moved by Claudia Biçen's Thoughts in Passing project, and I hope you have too. Here are the insights that Claudia learned about living right now in part 2 of Thoughts in Passing. Please visit our website, remembertodie.com, for more information on Thoughts in Passing. And follow us on the social media at Remember to Die. I'm D.S. Moss, back immediately for the next episode with more Adventures of Memento Mori.
The episode was produced by Josh Heilbrenner, D.S. Moss, and Hannah Beale. Theme music composed by Mikey Ballou. This has been a production of the Maida Creative Company. Until next time, keep seeking.